Gardner-Medwin lecture this year. It was named after our founder, as many of you probably know, Professor Gardner-Medwin, who was an architect at Liverpool University. And every year, annually, we have an invited guest to speak. This year, we're delighted to have Angela O'Kelly, who is an applied artist. She's also a curator and a lecturer, so she'll be talking all about her practice and things that she does. So she's got a real portfolio career, which I know lots of people these days have to have. After Angela's talk, we will have refreshments in the display centre, and there'll be an opportunity, if any of you don't want to ask any formal questions at the very end, to have an informal chat to Angela there. And so I can't think of anything else. I think everyone probably noticed the bathrooms as they came in, and you all know the way. If there's a fire alarm, which hopefully there won't be, similar way to the way we came, follow the green signs. So I'd just like to say thank you all for coming, and thank you, Angela, for giving us this talk. Thank you.
Thanks to Maureen and the Bluecoat for asking me over. It's great, my first time to Liverpool, and I've had kind of racing around all morning, having a look in the tent, and everything's fantastic. So as Maureen said, I'm a maker, a curator of applied art mainly in Ireland, and I lecture in the National College of Art and Design in jewellery and metalwork, just part-time. I'm based in Dublin, so what I'm going to do is kind of give you an overview of my practice since I was at college in the Edinburgh College of Art, and just to give you a sense of where the practice has come from, my inspiration, how I make the things that I make, and really where to go in the future. So to be talking about my own practice in the start, and then the second part, I'll be talking about some of the exhibitions that I've curated, mainly, as I said, in Ireland. So, yeah, as I said, I am a curator and maker. I studied jewellery and silversmithing in Edinburgh College of Art, where I did a degree, and then I set on to do a postgrad, and I graduated in 1998. I was very fortunate at the time with the tutors that we had up there, who were extremely passionate about exposing all the students. And I was picked up by great galleries like Contemporary Applied Arts, the British Crafts Council, other places. Even while I was still in college, I was doing shows in Sotheby's. I've worked in many private and public collections. Most notably, I suppose, the Museum's Modern Art and Design in New York, Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh, and galleries or collections in Ireland and China and so forth. Just to give you an overview of my inspiration, as I say, I am from Dublin. Every time I used to go back to Dublin on my holidays from Edinburgh, I was really drawn to going up. There's an area outside Dublin called Sally Gap, which is all bogland areas, and really you could be in the city and then this amazing vast space within half an hour, and it really is a beautiful, beautiful place. And while I was in Edinburgh, it was a very kind of technical, hands-on college, so we did stone setting, silversmithing. I originally wanted to be a silversmith. That's why I went to Edinburgh, because it had a really good silversmithing department. And I worked for a jeweller called Janet Perry, who's based in Salisbury, in between my third and fourth year, to up my skill set, because I didn't think it was good enough while I was making the silver and gold work. But when I came back into my fourth year, we were asked to do a project based on a fashion designer, and I worked with designs by John Lasher, an Irish-based fashion designer, where I looked at his current collection at the time, and I wanted to look at making very large-scale pieces but my metal pieces couldn't, I wanted to make very large scale metal pieces, but they were very heavy. I couldn't use an awful lot of colour in them. And my paper models that I had made for this collection were actually more successful than the metal pieces. Hence, I started then exploring papers and fabrics more in my fourth year. The inspiration for the collection for fourth year were repetition in lines of rock formation, colours from the Irish landscape, Irish bogs. I'm always fascinated by stones, and actually I'll come back to that later for a current project that I'm doing as well with stones and just really simple textures and colour from stones. Also, anything, as I say, that has repetition or folding structures and that you would find in nature. So a lot of my drawings aren't actually just pen and ink. I might sew into paper, put bleach onto paper and that, and all of these are drawings. These were some of the very quick sketches. Now I've included really terrible drawings from sketchbooks, just to maybe say, look, this is how it's done. It's not all really pretty work. These were some of the drawings on the John Asher fabrics at the time. And to explore different forms, I was interested in folding books and just pure repetition of folding in the books and the different shapes that you can get. And this slide, the next slide here, just shows how I've folded the books and then sewn down on each layer of the book as well, just to bring in different textures. And again, I was looking at Chinese text, because John Asher has an Oriental kind of upbringing in that as well, just looking at different texts and different papers, Japanese tissue papers and things like that as well. So the first pieces that I actually made for my tuition, the pieces on the right hand side, and they're very large scale wearable arm pieces, and they're made with layers and layers of newspaper, which I've dyed very, very subtly different shades. The one on the left hand side is made with the Financial Times, hence the pink pages, and the one on the right hand side is just like the Times or the Observer or something. But I've dyed the individual sheets, which would have been a circle, and then I folded the circle to make a D shape to fit in snugly onto the arm. And I've dyed them so that they look like the layers from the rock formations that I've been drawing, and layers from trees and barks of trees. So they're very, very subtle. And the whole collection at the time, the colours were really, really subtle on the pieces. The piece here, sorry, actually when I'm looking at the screen, there's two images that are coming up. So when I say the one on the right hand side, that's not coming up at all. It's just this one. So the piece here that you see is made from felt, and I was again looking at introducing much more textile techniques into the way that I was working, which was quite unusual for where I was. So they actually took me out of my bench space and gave me another space to work in the studio, a much more clean space where I had a sewing machine and that as well. The next piece here was a very large scale neck piece made with Japanese tissue paper, the cream section, and the grey section that you can see is made from layers and layers of silk organza, which has been dyed very subtly different shades of grey all the way through, with a print in it as well, which you can only see when you actually can manipulate the piece. There's a cord running all the way through, and then fine silver on the ends, which has been roll printed with the Japanese tissue paper to get that texture of the paper coming through as well. This was nicknamed at the time Term 2 because it actually took nearly a whole term to make, because I was making everything, all my own tools for cutting out, other tools then for holding, vices holding it together while I drew the holes through. So it was a very, very time consuming, but it was great to have to make everything myself while I was in college, because it gives you great knowledge then about how to design things into the future. This piece here was a large neck kind of cuff, which I embedded magnets into the felt while I was making the felt, so that it just basically very easily clips on and off. And there's fine silver in this as well, and it's paper thin fine silver. It's really, really beautiful, and you can sew thin that you can sew through on the sewing machine. So there's just glints of this through with felt, and a violin, which is like an interfacing that you use as well. So it's quite soft. But once all of these layers are together, they're actually very robust and strong because of their nature, because they're so tightly packed in together. And this was the work, quite not a very good photograph, but it showed my degree show at the time, which was 1997, so it's quite a long time ago. So I felt that I hadn't really, because I had just arrived at this, into my almost second run of the fourth year in college, I didn't feel that I was at a place where I could be let loose on the world really. So I was invited back to do a postgrad, which I accepted, and it gave me a chance to really work on the collection for the year. In between, the summer in between fourth year and my postgrad year, I worked for Textile, who are a textile company based up in the Orkney Islands, where I designed and made scarves. And they have massive industrial felting machine and things like that. Like they do fabrics for Paul Smith and John Rasha, and really, really amazingly dynamic work. And they sell their scarves in Japan and the States, really like Harvey Nicks and places like that. And it was just a wonderful experience, and working with other people as well. Like they outsourced their knitting and that into the community. But while I was there, I was really inspired by the seaweeds and the colour of the seaweeds, and just the water there is so amazing. Like you can see right down to the bottom of the seabed. It's so clean. And so I started taking an awful lot of photographs of the seaweeds and that as well. And for the work for my degree show, I was really inspired by those natural kind of colours in the boglands and that. But for my postgrad, I wanted to introduce much more colour, and the clashing colours that you get in nature and in other colour sources. So again, I was going back looking at ways of finding other, brighter colour stories and things like this. And this is where my dodgy drawings come out. And going to the botanical gardens and to the zoo and places like that, looking for form and much more exciting kind of clashing colours and form. And it was around this time that I found a paper yarn that's basically the paper yarn comes from the same company who makes the paper bags, with those thick handles. They make the paper yarn really, really, really fine as well. And again, looking at photography and imagining pieces like this, how they could be then translated into necklaces and neck forms. So I started doing drawing that when I was back in Edinburgh, and culminated this use of this really, really amazing paper yarn, and it's used commonly in Scandinavia for upholstery. And it's really, really strong and it's woven, even though it is just paper, a paper yarn. So I was looking at all of these very bright colours and the inspiration from the seaweeds and natural forms that I'd, done all this research on. And so I started dyeing the paper yarn. Again, very subtly different shades of the yarn. And then to create different textures, the Bluecoat there is knotted all on the ends. So you can imagine the amount of time, just even the simple knotting of hundreds and hundreds of these strands The red piece there, I had made felt balls, and the felt balls were only as an act of holding the elements together. So with the felt balls, I was sewing the paper yarn through to create much more texture in the pieces. In these forms here. This is going to look to make themselves. So I started making these pieces like the neckpiece that I have on, made from layers and layers of discs of paper and of fabric-based paper, and I would string those onto a stainless steel wire, and then add some fine silver on the ends as well. And I'll pass that around so you can have a feel and an idea of the piece. They're supposed to be very lightweight. I'm not really that interested in patches and things like that, so I want to make the jewellery so that it's really easy to get on and off. So the piece on the left hand side is more like a Celtic kind of brooch, and then other brooch pins have a rounded pin, so literally you only have to put in one hole and then twist the pieces on. And they're really, really easy and light to wear. So after my degree show, after my postgrad show, I was spending part of my time outside London and part back. I was teaching on a textile course actually back in Dublin, while doing shows with contemporary applied arts and other places like that in Dublin. And I moved. This is really odd because it worked fine a little while ago. I moved back into a garage that my mum outside her house had, and it's pretty bad pictures, quite untidy. But it just shows you some of the tools that I need to actually physically make the piece. So a big old fly press, rolling mills and things like that. And my brother-in-law used to work for Waterford Glass, Waterford Glass as an engineer. So himself and the team in Waterford made me this amazing machine. So I used to have to pull with the fly press, and I actually really was lopsided because I built up all this muscle on one side and not on the other. And I was having kind of problems with my back because I'd be basically pulling this machine all day just to cut out forms. So they made me a different machine with a compressor and foot pedals. So all I had to do then was, it was almost like a sewing machine. It was super. That's probably why Waterford's closed down. They were doing other things. So just to give you some images of different colourways and things like that I was looking at. The piece on the right hand side here is made with, again, Financial Times, and I was calling this millions and billions, and the next slide will have hundreds and thousands, because literally there's 350 layers of paper to 1 inch. So it just gives you, I can only cut out with the machines as well about 10 or 12 layers, because otherwise, because the paper is still quite soft, even if you squish it down very, very tightly, if you cut out any more than that, you won't get a perfect circle. It'll become more concave. So it does take an awful lot of time, even just to cut out and then thread them on, because essentially you're making sequins in a way, and then you're threading them all on. And the work, just here, I go through stages of working with very pure and very subtle tones of colour, and then it's like split personality, then working with really mental, very, very vibrant and clashing colours as well. I'm very interested in using recycled materials, and the pieces on the right hand side here with the six almost like window type things were made out of recycled catalogues. The other form in the middle, the grey stacking one, is made out of recycled postcards, and the circular piece down here is made with recycled plastic, So at the time, we can't use plastic in Ireland. Like you have to, if nowhere restocks plastic bags or anything like that. And if you do in a shop, actually they don't even do that anymore. You used to have to pay for your plastic, but now it's all paper bags and things like that. But at a stage, it used to be very accessible to get plastic, and I'd melt the plastics down into sheet form and then cut out the plastic. But it's not really recycling now if you actually have to go out and purchase the bags in the first place. So I don't really do that anymore. So I'm looking at really combining, the layers of paper together along with the paper yarn as well, and just looking at different structures. The pieces, when they're not worn, I do really want people to kind of display them in their house, because the wearable, the yarn pieces, as you'll see in the Bluecoat, are quite large scale, so people do have them as just objects in their house as well. So I was exploring other types of forms, very, very large, long neck pieces, and just even by twisting the ends of the paper yarn, I was getting a different dimension coming in as well. The piece on the left, the green piece, just to give you an idea, is dyed 5 times each strand of it. So the tips are dyed yellow, and there's 2 green sections, and then the centre is dyed yellow again. And then it's formed in different ways. And the blue piece then, the tips are unravelled and then dyed just a darker shade of blue and navy. And the ones, the white, these pieces, I'm unravelling them and then applying gold or platinum leaf on these and palladium leaf, and then curling them back up again. So you're just getting very subtle changes in the texture in that as well. Other work that I was doing at the time was working with some fashion designers, and Chalk was a company that were based outside Manchester. I think they're gone now. But they used really beautiful fabrics like boiled wools and cottons and things like that. And I worked with them on a couple of collections where they would actually send me over their fabrics, and then I would play around with their fabrics and incorporate the fabric that they were using in their clothing into wearable pieces for their collection. Sharon Guild, an Iranian a fashion designer who's based in London. I've worked with her since 2000, and mainly on her catwalk collections every year, and she used to have a shop in London that I would stock as well. And again, I thought I'd go over, have a meeting with her. She'd send me over swatches of fabrics and that, so I'd have to dye my papers very specifically for her colourways and things like that, which is really interesting. A nice way to collaborate on work as well. And the most recent work I've done for her with very large white neck scarves, and she's styling a movie in Japan earlier this year, so I was making white scarves for that. These pieces here are introducing a plastic tubing. It's actually a catheter tubing, so it's really, really unused and fine. And what I'm doing is putting the paper yarn through the tubes and then knotting them, so that I'm creating a light kind of texture and weight, but it's still quite sturdy because I've introduced this plastic tubing into the pieces as well. And you can literally just wrap them around and wear them almost like a scarf type pieces. So I'm always interested in making kind of smaller scale work and then larger scale, and kind of bouncing the ideas for the almost more wearable art pieces back down to how they would function more as a daily wearable piece as well. And these are other pieces using perspex and semi-precious stones along with felt and the paper. And I'm using a combination of paper, a fabric-based paper that comes in sheet form. It's I get it in rolls basically from Japan, and it comes almost as paper wood, but it's fabric. Along with felt as well. And I used to make all my felt myself, but most recently I buy it from my cloth house in London and places like that, where I could dye it up to my own colourways or try and get it in pre-dyed. And always making, felt balls and things like that for forming the work. And giving you other colourways. Introducing them again, just very simple. Fine silver, there's a strip in on the black piece on the left, and that just as highlights and glints in the forms. Again, looking at recycled use of, this was for the Crafts Council actually a few years ago, and they sent me catalogues to make pieces out of the catalogues. And some of these images, the other side isn't coming up. In 2005, the Irish Crafts Council had a really, really interesting thing that they had for their other makers that wanted to make a new product. They would give you up to €4,000 and you could match fund that, but you could match fund it with time rather than hard cash. And it allowed you to go out and redevelop and basically do what you do in college and places like that, where you're going out, taking photographs, drawing again, designing again. And when you're working all the time, you don't always have time to kind of step out and redevelop or develop new ideas and that, because you're almost on the treadmill that you're making from one exhibition to the next. And this was just allowing the class people just to kind of step out of their studio space for a little time and reimagine what they're doing in their practice. So I started taking an awful lot of photographs again, doing drawings, and I don't know why all the images aren't coming up, but again, looking at nature, looking at trees and nests in trees and things like that, and looking at different formations, and then some more anxiety drawings. Whereas going back in, taking ideas back into the studio and doing collage work as drawings. And my idea was that a lot of people, when they bought brooches and things like that, they were saying, what do I do with it? I want to hang it up, do I hang it on a nail? What do I do? So I made a series of wall pieces with detachable brooches. So the brooch element here is the kind of the tufty area, and the other area is it was a fabric-based paper with platinum leaf on it, and then it was kind of mounted onto a canvas or a frame. And the felt piece here, the tufty section, had magnets embedded into it, and then the wall piece had magnets embedded into it. So you can literally just, pop it off, wear it, and then pop it back on again when you're not wearing it. So it was just, a different kind of dimension and that as well. And a lot of the tips of this white tufty piece had platinum leaf coming through. And again, I was looking at barks, trees and layering. So even in the platinum leaf on the actual wall form, I was scratching back into it and exposing different layers. Like in the gold leaf from the bottom here, I wanted to scratch in and put different, very subtle, 18 karat or 22 karat or 24 karat gold leaves and that, and then scratching it back to expose very subtle colours in the pieces. And these aren't great images, and a typical case where you're working really fast for an exhibition and you think you're going to get the work back so you can photograph it properly, and then it never comes back, so you have no good photographs of it. But these were all brooches as well. The piece on the right hand side, the long piece, was a neck strap, so you could actually, it was on hooks, so you could take it off and wear it and put it back on. And you can't see very well in the light here, but the one on the right hand side is just a little stick pin, and there's actually a tube all embedded in behind felt and platinum leaf that you can't see, but the stick pin just sticks into it very, very simply. So you take it out and wear it again. Not sure. It's pretty. That my dad was a water well driller, which is a guy that goes around in this massive big machine, and it drills into the ground for water, for well water. And he had huge air filters that he used in the machine. And it was only, he died 10 years ago, but more recently when we were dismantling his shed, I found all these amazing air filters. And they're actually quite similar to my forms that I've always made, which was very strange to actually look at these air filters and go, they're very, very similar in form, and actually they've paper in them with their steel bound and then paper air filtering system in it, and very large scale as well. So I was looking at these forms and then reimagining these as almost like the air filters on pieces. And the piece on the left hand side are from old catalogues, as I mentioned before, but it was made into a very large scale wall piece. So you'd wish about 16 of these forms coming out from the wall, and you could interact with them. You can kind of spin them so they spin round and round. And actually my husband works in wind energy, so it's probably subconsciously kind of coming from that as well. And then looking at just the different forms, like repeating the unit of my arm pieces, but making them into more sculptural form as well. This was another image, more of kind of the air filters and that as well. And then I was reimagining those forms again into very large scale ring forms, and it's not something that I do. I don't do earrings and I don't do rings, and this was for a ring exhibition and somebody asked me to do it, so I was taking it as kind of a bit of fun really for this. Just the filtration, the little holes then coming through into my work as well. And looking at the different forms with using the leaf and different layers of felt, and I was basically forming different colours of felt together, so that when you cut through it, then you get different colours coming through with the leaf then on top of that. And I'm again scratching back the leaf so it's exposing other colour and that as well. And I'm really interested in the whole perceived notion of preciousness as well within the work of, I treat all my materials as precious, so I could be working with 18 karat gold or platinum palladium or a newspaper, but I'm treating it all in the same way. So everything is precious material. And then just other, again, quite large scale neck pieces. There's examples of similar pieces inside as well. Oh no, that's a really nice piece. That was not there. I'll see, we pull it up afterwards. More recent work again, working with these balls of felt, and then putting the platinum leaf on and introducing other balls with beads and that as well. The piece that we're missing here is, I'll try and pull it up afterwards, but it was a neck piece that was made for an exhibition in Ireland called 21st Century Icons, where they invited, have asked, there's group 5 craftspeople, and we've been paired up with poets. And I've been working really, really closely with the Dublin-based poet Jerry Smith. And we basically have gone for coffees and talked about life and other things. And he's written poems basically that invoke the conversations and email conversation that we've been having. And then I've made these 3-dimensional drawings as a result. And it's really been a beautiful kind of process. I've never done anything like this before, or working very closely with somebody else. And I've just produced 5 very, very simple wall pieces for this exhibition. So the next few slides that I'm going to show you are of exhibitions that I've curated. In 2005, I went back to college to UCD, University College Dublin, and I studied Masters in Cultural Policy and Arts Management. And at the time, there wasn't a huge amount of exposure of contemporary applied arts in Ireland. Like here, you are 10 years ahead of anywhere we are in Ireland. And I did this Masters with the view of working more in the arts of curating and exposing Irish artists to amazing work by bringing art into Ireland, or vice versa by taking the Irish craft out of Ireland and sharing it away. And the first exhibition I had was at the Club in their smaller gallery in Lincolnshire, and it's an amazing space. If any of you have not been, go, it's fantastic. And I took 5 Irish based makers who work a lot with texture and colour, and it was really interesting to actually not have everything on pristine white plinths. We basically painted everything yellow, and it was looking at different ways of exhibiting works, and looking down onto the plinths on the floor, and that looking right down into them instead of having them at eye level or tabletop level. We also introduced a texture table and that as well, so people could come in and have a feel and play around with the different textures that were there in their pieces. Another exhibition that I did was Playthings, and it was an exhibition that was aimed for children between the ages of 3 and 12. And everything, you could interact with it and play with it. So when adults came into the space, everything, they had to look down onto it again. It was everything was mounted for child height rather than for adult height. And it was quite successful. It toured a few different venues. This was work that was specially commissioned from makers, and it's harder and harder to commission makers now with lack of funding. But at the time in 2005, there was much more money around. Irish makers, some of these makers have never been shown back in Ireland again, and many of them would have done their undergrad in Dublin or another university in Ireland, and then come over maybe to the Royal College and had stayed, and then never really shown back. So it was a chance to expose some of their work. Makers like the Manchester-based maker C.J. O'Neill, Claire Kernoon, who's based in Cardiff, and other makers, Colleen O'Doyle, who's based in Sheffield. So it was really nice kind of welcoming back to some of these makers. And all of the works that I try to do is introducing new work that hasn't been seen in this particular space or in Ireland before. And in 2010, for the festival again, in one gallery we had Malala, the conceptual jeweller based in London. We had her meanings and attachments, and I'm not sure whether any of you know this project that she does, where she comes into a space and she invites passers-by in, anybody at all, and she has a photographic area, and you come in and you're wearing a piece of jewellery or whatever, you're wearing a brooch there, and she takes a picture of you and your brooch, and then you talk to her about the meanings and symbolism behind your brooch or your friendship bangle or whatever you're wearing. And it can be very, very simple, somebody just gave it to you, but why is it, why do we have attachments to it? And it was amazing the amount of stories that start coming out, or, the special things that were passed on, and, have really, really interesting meaning. And it was a lovely project because it got people all over the town then kind of talking about, oh, where did you get that, or why do you wear it, and things like that. And it was lovely. And so that was in one space, and in the other space I introduced makers that use a lot of new technology in their work, but only as part of their craft process. So I'm very interested in keeping and retaining craft skills, but with the introduction of people using laser machines or 3D printing and innovative materials as well. So some of the second slide in there is somebody who makes wall coverings with latex and iron filings and magnetic fibres. So you can take sections off and then apply it in different ways because all of it is magnetic, basically. Just really interesting kind of interesting forms. Another, you want to now team up much more within the strands of the festival. So the literature strand was curated by the writer Gardner-Medwin, and he had his list of writers and poets that were coming over. And I asked a group of craftspeople to read and respond to the works from the literature strand. So when I had identified the craftspeople, I then sent them about 5 or 6 books each, and then they could do whatever they wanted. They could either cook the books up or read them and then make works in response to them. And so it was all new work that was made for the exhibition. And this went on and toured into Dublin, a couple of other venues. And it was really nice because then again we were introducing poets and writers into the space and using a very traditional kind of craft space for other mediums and forms then as well. And this was just some of the images then in a library that they were, you can hardly see, but on the top right hand corner are Claire Brewster, who's in the exhibition next door, her butterflies, and they've kept the butterflies in the library, and the text, her text in vinyls all over the library as well, from the poets and the writers. And it was nice that they have kept it in the since. Other work that I do with the National Craft, or the Crafts Council of Ireland, are working, they have guilds and networks. And it's makers that it's a combination of makers that are hobbyists, makers that are semi-professional and professional makers. And exhibitions like the Knit and Stitch show in the RDS is a way of exposing some of the makers who wouldn't necessarily get into the National Craft Gallery exhibitions. It's a way of exposing them in a different gallery format. And so I work quite closely with the guilds for them. And it runs until the end of October. Was an exhibition called Utensils. So it was work inspired by tableware. And some of it is functional, and some of it is not functional at all, but it all alludes to ritual and meanings around tableware. So we have silversmiths like Snow and Hempel and David Clark. There's a mix of product designers and applied artists, so people making one-off works and people making more interlimited production lines and that as well. And the piece on the left-hand side here is a piece called The Whispering Table. It's very interesting. It's a group of product designers who are based in Berlin, the States, and in London. And it's about the ritual of mealtimes and food preparation in different religious ceremonies. And the ceramic vessels, when you pick them up, you place them beside your ear and they speak to you when you have them up beside your ear. But when you place them down again, they're completely silent. And it works on sensory technology, and we have sensors embedded into the table. So when you move then the objects around the table and pick them up again, it tells you a different story about rituals in food. So it's a highly interactive experience for the makers coming in. And we had held wire workshops and things like that. Now, I don't have an image of that, unfortunately, but we displayed wire drawings as well, because we have Kathy Miles' work and people like that as well who form in wire, three-dimensional wire. So a lot of the activity around, because it is a festival, we're drawing on a large audience base. So it can't be, pinpoint one specific audience. We have to, try and bring as many people into the space as possible. So that was a really, really interesting project. So what I'm doing is limited enough that I can make, because I am doing curating and I'm lecturing as well. So it's, trying to blend it all together can be difficult, so it's harder to make more production work as well. But I quite like to see one-off pieces within the practice. And that's what I'd like to do in the future. Thank
you. Yeah, I think you can track these in the same one. I'm sorry about that. By all means do. I know it was really interesting hearing about all the different strands of your career. I think Rebecca Goulson might have a question. Yes, Rebecca.
I was just wondering how you feel about commissioning. Do you have a lot of clients, private clients who will commission you? How do you feel about the process of working in that way?
Okay, I'm in two mindsets. Sometimes I love it, and then sometimes I wish they would just buy whatever is out there. I used to do Origin for many, many years, which used before that was Chelsea Craft Fair, and I would welcome commissions at that stage because I wanted to send my stock then to all the galleries straight afterwards. So I'd work a lot on commissions, but it takes a lot of time and effort to work directly with people, and the process, then maybe send me over colour swatches and that as well. It's maybe worked out quite well, and usually people will allow me free rein to do whatever I want to do, and then the odd time I might send a collection of pieces over to a client, and then they'd send it back to me, and they might say, well, I like this element or I like that element, and work that way.
Is anyone else? That's really good. Anyone else got any questions they'd like to ask?
Angela, really lovely work. I must admit, it's very distinctive. It's very recognisable. And I, as Maureen and the others know, I do buy a lot from Bluecoat, but I've hesitated because I just wondered how durable your work is. And excuse me asking that question. If I get a bit hot and sweaty or going to the belly or something, what would happen to the pieces?
It's actually fine. Like this piece here is probably about 11 years old, and it's the one that ends up like on the table in the pub and all of that. And what if you do get makeup on them? I get baby wipe and rub it on the pieces. And then obviously if the silver here is going to get tarnished, I should clean up just a cotton bud into just silver cleaner and clean it around it. Obviously I used to only make white for Sharon Guild, who always wants to wear white neck pieces herself, and then you don't sell them in the shop, just have them yourself. But another few people have asked for white, and that is harder. And it is more one-off wears or the special occasion wears, but the coloured work is absolutely fine. And the majority of the fabric paper that I use is fabric, so it's easier to clean, and they're quite robust. If you have a feel, you can squish right into it and that, and it is quite robust. Don't put it in the washing machine, obviously. But you wouldn't with a Philip Tracy hat or whatever either.
So you don't coat it with anything?
I don't coat it with anything at all. No.
And are the little discs, are they just held together with pressure?
Oh,
or is it glued together?
So this, is a stainless steel wire all the way through, and then the silver at the end, the disc, I've soldered on a silver tube into it, and then I've put all the discs, down onto the tube, so it's the same dimension as just over the wire. So then the wire is glued and then pressure fitted as well onto, so it's a male-female kind of fitting into it, and so it just stays. And I use like a resin-based glue as well, so that if there's any give or people are kind of messing with it, there is a give in it, but it doesn't come off. Yeah. I've never had them back actually, but no, not these. A lot of them, like even in the nylon that I use, the catgut and that, I very simply use Dylon dyes or acid-based dyes, which then I can mix for particular colours.
It looks like that might be it. As I say, Angela will be happy to answer any questions in the exhibition.